In this video, we learn how to find trig values for angles that are multiples of 90 degrees. And we're only going to be using the sine and cosine graphs in this video. So before we begin, we need to understand an important fact about graphs of functions. So let's just say we've got a random function. Let's call that y equals f of x. So this is the graph of f of x. And then let's say we've got a point on the graph. So I'm just going to draw a point there. And let's say that's AB. Then the y coordinate would always be f of the x coordinate. So f of A equals B. And this works for any point on the graph. So if I draw another point here, for example, I'm just going to use actual numbers for this just for the sake of example. So let's say that's -2, 3. So the point -2, 3 lies on this graph. Then that would give f of -2 equals 3. So if you plug in this value into the function, that gives you this value. And all this is saying really is that if a point lies on a graph, then its coordinates satisfy the equation of the graph. So you can see that we've simply taken the x coordinate and plugged it into the x value in the equation. So we've just put x equals -2. And then we've taken the y coordinate of the point and we've replaced that over here. So y equals 3, because that's the y coordinate of the point. So that's y equals 3. And the reason this is important is because it allows you to find values of trig functions without using a calculator. So let's consider y equals sine x, for example. So I'll just go ahead and draw the sine x curve. So it goes something like that. And then let's just label it quickly. So this is 180, that's 360, and so on. And then that would be 1, that would be -1. And then let's say we wanted to find sine of a multiple of 90. So let's say 270, for example. So that's 3 times 90. So we would start by going to that x coordinate on the graph. So this is the graph of y equals sine x. So this represents the x coordinate because it's over here in the equation. So 270 would be halfway between 180 and 360. So that would be 270. And that means the point on the graph corresponding to x equals 270 would be this point on the graph. So it's just 270 minus 1, because that would be -1 at this point. So that means that this value over here, the y coordinate, is just f of the x coordinate. And since f of x is sine x for this graph, we get sine 270 equals -1. So essentially it's f of 270, and the function f of x is sine x for this graph. So sine 270 is -1. So we found the value of sine 270. Okay, let's try finding sine of -180 this time. So if we go to -180 on the x-axis, that would be this point over here. So the coordinates of that point are just -180, 0. And that means that sine -180 equals 0. So that would just be 0. So that's how you find trig functions for values that are multiples of 90. Okay, let's do an example. Write the following in order of size, starting with the smallest. And it says cos 90, cos 100, cos 300. Just find your answer. So these aren't multiples of 90, but we can still use the method we've just covered to compare them using a graph. So let's just draw them on a graph. And it's a cos graph this time. So it would go something like this. And then that would be 1, that's -1. And then this is 90, 270, and so on. So that's -90, -270. And then cos 90 would be over here on the graph. So that point would be 90, 0. And that simply means that cos 90 equals 0, as we've just seen. So cos 90 equals 0. And then we've got cos 100. So that would be somewhere here. So the point would be over here on the graph. And it's quite close to -1, but it's not actually -1. So all we can say is that it's negative. The y coordinate is negative. So we'll just write minus VE. That just means negative. So that tells us that cos 100 is less than 0. And the final point is 300. So that would be over here somewhere. This would be, so 270, that would be 360. This would be 450. So 300 would be over here somewhere. So the y coordinate isn't quite 1, but it's still positive. So it would be 300 and then the positive y coordinate. So that tells us that cos 300 is more than 0. And that's enough information to organize the values in order of size. So cos 100 would be the smallest because it's negative. And then it would be cos 90 and then cos 300.